All right, everybody, welcome to a live taping of the Radical Therapist podcast. I'm really excited to be here at Scribble. And when Jon and I were exchanging some emails, I forget how it actually came together, but I've been watching, I think from the get-go, Scribble's, at least your social media, and I've been watching from the get-go, and just the energy that has been coming out of this place, and the work that you're all doing, all the people involved with Scribble, and just this nice mix of creativity and therapy and accessible therapy that's happening here at Scribble. But not just that, but also all the programming around it. It was just really, really exciting. So when we exchanged some emails and I said something about let's have you on the podcast, and you had an even better suggestion about coming up here and doing something live. And this is just, I'm really excited to do this. We're going to talk to Jon a little bit about Scribble, and then we're going to open it up to a live reflecting team. So those of our listeners who aren't familiar with the reflecting team process will get to experience that, and we'll just have a lot of fun doing it. So, but just to get started, I have a couple questions for you, Jon, before we get started. And maybe my first one is, the genesis of Scribble. How did this all come together?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me to do this first and foremost, because I'm a huge fan of the podcast and a huge fan of yours. And I started listening a really long time ago. So it really feels wild to be on this. So I could speak a little bit to how Scribble came about. I have had many a years as a touring musician, playing in mostly DIY spaces around the country, and sleeping in various cement corners. And I, the whole time, I kind of, this was long before I became a therapist, but I always wondered, like, what happens in here during the day? I was always curious, like, there's these great spaces, and then, every night they have, 3-4 band bills, and I just became curious about space in general and what it can be used for. But when I went back to school to become a therapist about 13 years ago, I was coming off of actually a tour, and I was just immediately kind of in grad school, and I was learning about different types of therapy. And I remember them telling me in that first quarter, they were like, yeah, and in 3 quarters, you're going to use this silver book, and you're going to tell people what their problems are, and you're going to diagnose them. And I was like, what the heck? Like, how, what? I just came off of sleeping on a cement floor, like in Oklahoma, like 2 weeks ago. And I just was like very uncomfortable with the idea of the amount of power that was going to be given to me in a short amount of time. And I remember looking around and feeling as though the people who surrounded me didn't really have that same sort of feeling. They were just kind of like, yeah, makes sense. And I just felt like very confused, and so for me, it really is what initially attracted me to postmodern work, and specifically narrative work, was the ideas of power and how it's used within a therapeutic context. And I remember also sitting in a class, and it was my second quarter at Antioch, and I was sitting there, and we were talking about, again, all these forms of healing, and I remember thinking, like, wow, these are all like, so you just kind of do this, and then you just kind of, like, it was all very linear, you do this, you have these types of conversations, and then you get to this place. And so for me, I'd always viewed my life and my relationship to healing as more of a scribble than it is a linear path. And so I remember even being in grad school, 13 years ago, kind of thinking about the name and the image of a scribble and like how that felt connected to my own path of healing, in both its complexity and messiness, and how, you know, everyone kind of has a different version of a scribble. And so for me, that was kind of where the name came from. But the idea itself was really birthed out of, you know, this place really feels like an extension of me and my soul, and wanting to, you know, have a place where arts and healing can reciprocate each other, not only for people, but also in the ways that it links community. I'm reminded all too often of how healing and therapy is very much viewed as an individualistic path in our culture. And for me, I really wanted to create a space that honored group healing and group connection. I'm talking a lot.
All right, well, I'll interrupt you here. And
you're going to have to cut me off. I did have a club mate before this
okay.
interview.
Good to know.
Yeah.
All right, so you did speak to the intersection of artistic practice and therapy, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how art can be a tool for, you know, mental or relational well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's two pieces to that question. One being, we work with a lot of artists here, which is something that we can definitely talk more about. But I really think that what attracted me originally to narrative work was the use of metaphor and getting playful with conversations and generative types of questions. And so for me, the practice of being a therapist in itself feels very artistic. Most recently, I've over the past 6 or so years, I've been really interested in the ways in which photographs can be held in therapeutic conversations with people, which is a huge part of my practice these days. And I did design a workshop that I teach at Antioch on the use of narrative therapy and the use of photographs. And for me, I just think that photographs hold such a rich storytelling that people quite often hold in their pockets all day long with them. And so that was really born out of me working at a high school where, you know, kids would come up to me and they'd be like, hey, check out my phone, like, check this out, like, check out what I did. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, and then I'd be like, but let's get to the therapy stuff, okay? And it took me a while to kind of realize, oh, they're showing me like what's important to them. And how can I use photographs in clinical conversations to kind of create space? And so that's like kind of a creative practice that I've really been honing over the years. But also just the idea that, you know, people who are clients here, they also perform here, you know? They're not just, you know, getting therapy and being a part of the groups. They also come and perform here. They organize things here. They volunteer here. We're a volunteer-run organization right now, with the exception of the therapy end. So it's really created this kind of circular sort of system. And again, I think that really takes a stand against kind of the more capitalist agendas that really want sort of division between the two. Like therapy is something you do, and then art is something you do, right? And it's kind of like, my thoughts have always been like, how can those coexist together under one roof? I think is a really beautiful thing.
Wonderful, yeah. Given that your community largely consists of artists, musicians, and other creative individuals, I'm wondering, and we're probably going to talk about this more as this conversation continues, but what unique challenges do these folks face? Yeah.
So it's really interesting because myself and the group of associates, we have a lot of conversations around like some of the themes that tend to show up. And as a I'm still a performing musician. I still go on tour and all these things, and I can highly relate to all these sort of systemic issues that have been percolating for a very long time, but seem to be reaching a very escalated point. And I think a lot of what we're coming up against is, again, the intersectionality between capitalism and art, and how that's currently functioning in a culture that doesn't really privilege the arts. And to kind of piggyback off of that, I did have a few questions that one of my associates, Isabella, who's actually here. Isabella's here. I wrote down some of these great questions that Isabella runs a group here called an artist support group. That's a pay what you can group. It happens weekly, and it's a open group. Anyone can come, pay whatever they would like, and be a part of this therapeutic group. And I wrote down some of the guiding questions that Isabella had that kind of, I feel like, really speak to your question. And I'd love, is it okay if I read them really quickly? Yeah. So these are some of the frameworks that outline our artist support group. How do you understand your sense of value outside the level of success? Do you feel you have to commodify yourself to make money from your art? How do you stay connected to artistic practice while doing other work to survive? And what does it mean for art to, quote, matter? And what does it matter to you? I really love these questions.
Yeah, great questions as well.
Yeah, they're really great questions because I think they really point to this idea of success, and also kind of like we're bombarded by so many stories of what success looks like. And we're also bombarded with the idea of, in terms of like, quote, career, having to choose one thing in our life, and that's who we are. And that's who defines us. And I feel like a lot of my own path has been a rejection against that idea that I can be a multiplicity of things, not just choose one thing to go after.
But it's hard work.
It's hard work. Oh, yeah. Well, it's hard work. Yeah, it is hard work. But I also think that, right now we're forced into a position as artists to have to make a lot of decisions about how are we going to survive, especially in LA. I mean, it is extremely expensive here. The cost of living continues to go up. So I think that's definitely a common theme, is around the intersection between sort of capitalism and systems of power and how they operate within artistry.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for the questions. All right. I mentioned Scribble Community offers a wide range of programs and workshops, and I'm wondering if you can give us an overview of the different types of programming you provide, and just kind of the large mix that can be found here.
Yeah. So, we, in addition to kind of having sliding scale therapy work happening Monday through Friday here, we have a weekly Tai Chi class that meets on Tuesdays. That's amazing. We also have music concerts and shows and comedy and performance that happens here Thursday through Sunday. People on tour choosing to play here. We're also, I think, I'd probably have to search really deep for this, but I'm pretty sure we're the only all ages non-alcohol space in LA to go see music right now, which is, I think this is a piece about Scribble that I'm always reminded of, is that like we are filling a definite gap in the idea of what a performance space can look like. We poured a lot of energy into making this place sound really good. I have a long background of recording music, and I've been getting a lot of people who want to play here on tour because we don't serve alcohol and we can have kids at the show. And I didn't even think about that. That just seemed like something that felt normal to me in my mind. But yeah, I guess that's a unique thing about the space that are attracting a lot of people on tour to playing here. And then, yeah, we also have, the artist support group. We have a bunch of other groups. We also have another Pay What You Can group for people of color. We have, in terms of programming, we also have a breathwork class that meets weekly.
12-step groups.
We have 12-step groups. We have a community peace choir that's full of people to come and just sing every Saturday at noon. And so, yeah, these are also just ways of fostering connection. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, I know you got some future plans, so what are the future plans for Scribble? What are the upcoming projects or expansions?
Yeah, so we've been open since October, and since October have become near capacity. We probably see anywhere from 150 to 180 people a week here for low-fee counseling services. The space next door recently opened up after 30 years or so, and so we are planning on building a few more offices over there to be able to accommodate more people. And we're also starting a traineeship program over there, which I'm really excited about. So that's really exciting on the therapeutic end. On the other end, and I think this is why I really love reflecting teams. I really love outside witnessing practices because it invites, again, like more sense of other voices in the context of conversations. And something that we've been doing here, which I've really want to lean more into, is bringing these practices to musicians and artists who are celebrating or having release shows or records coming out. I've found that that music journalism has become rather flat, and I really want to find ways of kind of celebrating records that don't just exist on the phone or going to an app. I really want to kind of thicken the stories around record releases specifically. So we've done a couple of them where we've done such reflecting teamwork with someone who's going to play here. They have an album release, and we get together and we have those conversations, and with the intention of thickening the storylines and bringing more dimension to work that is extremely special and spiritual, and can often just kind of find this flatness in the world today where release structure is built off of this formula and blogs writing about it but not really writing about it in a way. And so we're trying to kind of take a stance there, and that's something I'm really proud of and really want to lean into.
Yeah, that's exciting, and I look forward to seeing what continues to happen. You did mention reflecting teams, and maybe now is the time we kind of move toward the reflecting team interview of one of the artists in your community. And I guess, can you share a little bit about the process for our listeners, maybe a little bit about what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then maybe some introductions.
Yes. So I'm really excited about these practices, and I've been doing them with different artists over time. And I think that what I'm really drawn to is how generative these types of conversations can be in just, we don't know where they're going to go. We don't know where they're going to go, but I find that I've never had someone like do them and be like, that wasn't worth it. That wasn't worth it at all. So
same.
I'm excited about it. Just some of the practice that we're going to do is, so Lucas Nathan, who's sitting to the left of me right now, is a dear friend, and I love them very much. And Lucas and I met some time ago when I went on tour opening for their band Jerry Paper. I don't remember the year. I don't know. It was some time ago. But what I'm really interested in is I was thinking when I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking, well, it would be cool to get interviewed and then have me interview someone and then have that get passed to some other people and have it kind of just be this reciprocal conversation that's kind of built off of one another. I'm reminded of this idea of co-sparking that I think Will mentioned at one point in one of the narrative camp videos, and it's always stuck with me. So this idea of co-sparking conversation, and so what we're going to do is kind of, and this isn't maybe a traditional interview per se, like that we might be used to within like music journalism, but we're just going to have a conversation, and we've invited a group of people here who are amazing, who also are going to stand as kind of like outside witnesses, and they'll introduce themselves in a moment. But some of the intentions of this practice is for the outside witnesses to listen with a particular stance and intention, and some questions that really help ground me in this practice, which I love, which I'm going to read right now, are what particularly stood out to them in what they just heard, and what struck a chord with them. What images of the person these words evoked, and what did it suggest about purposes, values, and beliefs? What was it about your own life and work that accounted for why these particular words had caught their attention? And how have you been moved or transported on account of what you have heard? Michael White question. And so while listening kind of to this conversation, those are some things to keep in mind. And then we're going to spend some time talking, and then I'm going to turn to kind of the team over here, and they're going to kind of share some things that they found interesting in the tellings. And then we're going to come back, and then you can kind of piggyback and co-spark off of those tellings, and then we'll just all kind of come together in conversation. And there's a mic also over here in the as you all witness this conversation, for you to kind of weigh in the part 4 part. And that's kind of. Did I miss anything as someone who's like,
I think you covered
not
it
as
well.
seasoned? Yeah. Okay.
That's great.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So maybe we could just have everyone introduce themselves,
Yeah.
and maybe say your name, your pronouns, and where. Just a little about yourself. And so I'm Jon, he, him, and I am honored to be here and in this conversation as the interviewer. Yeah, and we'll go maybe just to the left. Cool.
I'm Lucas, they, them pronouns. I've been a musician for a while, and recently have decided to grow my life.
Ooh, mysterious. I'm already curious what's going on. Okay, cool. Yeah, you want to just pass it? Yeah, pass it down.
Hi, I'm Doug Poole, he, him. Yes, like Lucas and Johnny, I'm also a musician. Let's see, I don't know, I recently moved to LA in January, and really happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Tanya Barr, pronouns she, her. I am an MFT here in LA. Also have my own artistic practice that sometimes gets scribbled in and out of my life. And being here, the scribble is like, there's more weight to it right now, remembering. So yeah,
Cool.
I'm glad to be here.
Awesome.
Hi there. My name's Lucy Cotter, she, her, co-founder of the Narrative Counseling Center, many, many decades as an artist, which I would say is my primary love that infiltrates everything that I do, and I'm so happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Claire Gordan-Harper. I am an associate here at Scribble with Jon and a few other friendly faces I see here. I am also a musician and have found this to be a really important intersection of my work as an artist, a musician, a songwriter, and my passion for postmodernism and narrative therapy. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and, yeah, have resonance.
Hi, I'm Scott Ferrara. Pronouns are he, him, and I am thrilled to be here. My first love actually was poetry, and I had an opportunity to merge that with stage work for many, many years, and so I am fascinated by lyrics and the poetry of the body and how those merge, and really excited to hear what emerges today.
Awesome. Thank you. Now I want to interview everyone. Okay, great. And then maybe what we'll do is kind of chat for a bit, and then we'll find a time to take a pause in between. Actually, I gotta realize why my face, so cool. Oh my gosh. All right. I'm really excited about this. I know we've known each other for some time, and I'm so excited because, well, first off, could you tell me a bit more about what you mean by your life growing?
Well, I guess I use that language because I decided that I was going to be a musician when I graduated from college and realized, I have no skills. I can't do anything except for this one thing. So I kind of decided, like, okay, if I want to have meaning in my life, I have to make my job the thing that gives my life meaning already. So I kind of decided, like, okay, this is the path for me. I'm going to do everything I can to make it work, and that's it. So then for a long time, I was kind of focused on that. I wanted to make this experience, like my experience making music is the experience of making myself anew all the time, and it is something that gives my life so much meaning. And yeah, I mean, I was young, and I think so much of what we're told is making money from what you love is like, never work a day in your life, when, I don't know if that's true. You're definitely working pretty hard. And then, like over several years, I've been confronted with kind of the realities of like a music career and the challenges and limits to fulfillment in that. And I guess 2 years ago now, I got back from a 6-week tour. There were 2 days off. It was crazy. Like it was just like a really intense tour, really harmonious band dynamics. Like everything about it felt so good, but at the same time, like I got home and immediately I was like, my life needs to change. I need something more. And you have been a big inspiration of seeing someone who has, I guess, what I think of as like a life that is multifaceted. You do so many different things. You are so steeped in music and in healing, and I found myself to be very, I don't know, I saw a path through your life that felt like I could make my own life that is very different, but would also involve more.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of many different things. Also, so much of it had to do with me getting fed up with the focus of music career being on selling the product, when it's finishing a record is the least fulfilling thing. It's like being lost in the creation of it is where all of the meaning comes from, and the finished product is, for me, it's a mirror that I can look at and see who I am now and who I was then at the same time. So what I started to feel is like I want to help people be in the process. I want to be with people in the process rather than selling the product.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Oh man, that rocked me. I just need a moment. Oh, okay. That made me tear up. So you said a lot that is really I'm curious about, and I'm hearing a few things, and I maybe I could. There's like several directions here that feel really great. And I was thinking maybe I could just share with you what I was writing down, and then maybe you could tell me what feels like a direction that we might want to talk more about.
Sure.
Does that sound good? This piece around meaning as it relates to choice, to become a musician, and the idea of making yourself anew all the time. I was really drawn to that as seemingly a value that stuck out. And I'm also really curious around this idea of needing more from life, hitting a point where it seems like there's this great harmonious tour, and I don't know what you might name that moment that happened there, where you felt as though life needed to change, and then just this idea of process versus product as it relates to the current path that you're on, and what your hopes of how that might change. That was a lot of stuff. But did
Yeah,
any
I
of
don't
those
know.
things, did any of those things speak to you in terms of things that might be important to discuss here?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they all do. It's
Yeah.
hard to choose.
Well, we might find they all weave into each other or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I guess what pops into my head right now,
Yeah.
I think of the second thing you were talking about of like, what would I name that moment?
Yeah.
I don't know about name so much as like something concise, but I can freestyle a little bit.
Yeah, freestyle.
The feeling for me was very much a recognition that something has been happening for a long time that I didn't know about. And then over the something interesting happened after that as well, which is like I got home and I was like immediately knew that I needed something to change, and that I wanted to start school to become a therapist. Like that was just, I think I realized that had been in the back of my mind for many years, and I hadn't been looking directly at it. But all of a sudden I was there and I was looking at it and I was like, that's exactly what needs to happen. And then I did something kind of funny, which is I was like, okay, I know this needs to happen. I'm going to do it in 1 year. And I was like, I'm going to give myself like so much of the like value and meaning I find from music is getting lost in it. And I was like, okay, like I've had all this time, like I want to give myself time to like really get lost in it. And instead what happened was I spent a year feeling kind of confused and depressed and like I was not able to give myself over to it. And I didn't realize until I started school that what had happened was a vision of my future had already died. And I was trying to live inside of that for another year. So I had like applied to start in July or whatever, right when, And then I just spent a year basically poking a corpse, just being like, come on, it's time to get up, we got to do this. And then it was it was gone already. And then oddly enough, when I started school, it was my creative side just immediately came back, and I was so driven by the curiosity of music and and of learning something new. I mean, something that I've always loved is learning something new and feeling like a little baby. I love going to Moonlight Rollerway to roller skate because I'm so bad, and there's and everyone's so much better, and there's just a 7-year-old ripping it up, and I'm like, so I feel like I'm kind of doing that again, but in a different way, by going back to school. And I don't know. I think that is really exciting for me. So I don't know if I answered anything, but that was just kind of what my mind went.
I love that. I was sitting here thinking about this image, the vision of the corpse stuck out to me a bit, and I was sort of wondering: is there a relationship between a vision of your future already dying and making yourself anew all the time?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you speak to that just a little bit more about the making of yourself anew and the death of a future that felt just how that works a bit for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I am making music and it's at its best, I feel like I'm lost in finding out where I am right now. I get very lost in the experience, and it feels very, I don't know, immediate. And I think that experience of not acknowledging where I actually was and trying to be somewhere that I used to be was very much the opposite of when my life is fulfilling and when my creative practice is fulfilling. So yeah, it's kind of, that was a moment of disconnection from myself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. I find the fulfilling thing being finding the connection in myself, in how I've changed from yesterday and the day before and all those things.
Yeah. And maybe I have one more question, maybe before we turn to hearing what the outside witnesses are picking up. You mentioned a bit about going back to school and how once you started doing that, your creativity bloomed again after that year. And I'm curious, what's your understanding of kind of, in addition to kind of being more on this path that felt, would you use the word intuition, or what would you use?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think of it more in a sense. I think of it more of following my ear or something, or following my nose.
Yeah.
But yeah, intuition definitely is related.
Yeah. Yeah. So in following your ear, following your nose, towards, this journey in becoming a therapist and being a student, what's your understanding of how that's kind of contributing to your artistic practice these days?
I mean, I think that is related to being close to my curiosity. Because I think another time when music is fulfilling is when I make a mistake and follow it. It's less about having an idea of the song and I want this song to be this way and blah, blah, blah. It's less about intellectualizing the desire and more just being in it and letting it go. And I think that is very connected to just general living for me as well. Being able to follow my curiosity. I got really swept up in my interests. I become fully obsessed whenever I'm I'll like be obsessed with gardening and be like like nonstop, and then like everything dies, and I'm like, oh no, like I did so bad. Like, but also then realizing like just that the process of being like so swept up with the curiosity is like that's where it's at. It's not like how many tomatoes I get. Or like,
Yeah, you're the one who taught me that worms use eggshells as teeth for the compost. So it's stuck with me. Okay, cool. Would now be an okay time to just take a quick break and hear from everyone over here? Maybe we could start on the far. Are you down? There's a mic over on. No. Okay, that would be great. Lucy, do you want to start? Or would anyone like to say anything over there?
I reached for the mic.
Okay, great.
Is this on?
It should be on, yeah. I think you got to hold it close to you, though.
Oh. Is that like the nature of the beast?
That's the nature of the microphone, yeah.
I was really captured by this idea. I actually had a sort of a vision. I was thinking about how you said I recently decided to grow my life, and this idea of your vision of the future already having died and poking the corpse. And I had a vision of sort of a shed skin or ectoplasm or some kind of outgrowing where you could be that baby anew. And you said you were trying to be somewhere that you used to be, and that you felt disconnected to yourself, and that sort of supported that feeling I was having, or that vision I was having, like disconnecting from that old self. And it also made me wonder how you would borrow from that sense or that ability as a therapist when you're in process with others. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Yeah. I actually want to build on that, Lucy. I was really, really taken with a couple of things. The corpse metaphor, and you have video for a song about play where you are getting on and off the horse. Yeah, I don't know the name of the song again.
Know Me is the song. Yeah.
Know Me.
Yeah, or I can't get on a horse.
Yeah. And I was struck by the play in that, and then once again this idea of playing with the corpse of what was in order to bring about, like, maybe it was the baby. It's this idea of the baby who gets to play with that corpse of what was for a year. And I don't know, there's just something really exciting about the possibility of like composting and what gets to be grown anew in this compost of all that you are playing with and allowing to return back to the universe in a way. But there's the energy of play is really what sits with me, especially as a therapist. I do agree that therapy is a form of creation and play. And so I'm really, I'm just really struck by and a little bit moved in imagining what your play will look like in the therapeutic process, and how I'd be interested in what you envision with that.
Yeah, hi. I was very, very drawn to the idea of being lost in creativity, and that's when curiosity feels closest, and the intersection of curiosity and creativity and moving towards mistakes, that when mistakes arise, there's a moving toward it. And I was having this image of you with a quilt sewing patches onto of different parts of songwriting and music, and being in the process. I think I want to be with people in the process. and that there was this mirroring of being in the process of getting lost in music and in the process of getting lost in story with another, in the process of therapeutic conversations. And then I kept picturing these patches of your life and the seams come undone, and where many people might sort of see the phrase and see them as mistakes to stay away from, that there's a moving toward. And I was very, very moved by that, and have so much curiosity about the intersection of songwriting and story and therapy for you, and how that's already moving.
Thank you.
So much. I so appreciated that there was this, as you described it, the sense of the nose and the ear hearing, where sort of what was sort of how to sort of navigate this disconnection and then reconnection, and how what happens when the creative side comes back. That very much touched me, of that sort of resurgence of that. And I was actually thinking of the video of I think your favorite song. I don't remember the title of it, but you're starting eating chips, and there's a video of it you're watching, I think you're watching Meerkats on,
I sent the video of the one that Dan did with you on the bubble with the Muppets in the car.
Yeah. And this Johnny's singing the background vocals in the chorus.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, I even forgot that. Honestly, I love the video.
That's why
Yeah,
you
the
love
video.
it so much.
Yeah, oh, I didn't know I was.
Now
on
we know
that.
why it's your favorite.
Yeah.
But there was this arc of disconnection, and then coming back into community, and into nature, into really the complexity of it, and that I just so appreciated how in a strange way how potent disconnection can be, and how it can often be sort of pushed aside when it can actually be such a beautiful catalyst for reconnection.
I actually want to speak to that also, because I was struck by, when I was watching the video that Jon shared, how there was an element of absurdity, and I borrow a great deal as an artist, bringing ideas that sort of breach the familiar into my narrative work, and it made me really think about the power of absurdity to break out of the familiar, and not only my respect for it within the music and the videos, but it made me extra curious how that might be helpful to your clients who are sort of looking at their lives from a more sort of maybe habitual understanding or familiar perspectives, and how it would be a gift to bring that aspect of yourself and your work into your therapy.
I was struck by a lot of the images that other people already talked about. I think also the corpse, and also the idea that in music making, or that music making is like, I think when you said like kind of constant reinventing yourself, I heard like also maybe also a becoming yourself, like not that there is something like that has to be changed in the past, but just sort of like an opening up into the future. And then I was also thinking about that, I guess just in relationship to, music as like, so I was thinking about that, and, the corpse, and sort of like this idea of a future and a past, or like the dead future, kind of, I'm getting tongue-tied.
It's okay.
I guess I was just thinking about that also in relationship to music as like kind of a time-based medium, where, let's say you're listening to a song there's only, in any instant, you're only hearing one instant of the song sort of as it unfolds. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah.
Doug, there's something for me here about the idea of the opening to the future. And Lucas, you've mentioned, and I don't know if it was so much your words as what was coming up was this idea of the moving in and out of harmony. And so there's something about discordance as an opening into the future and the becoming, and something about being balance, and balance as an ongoing endeavor to be with the discord, then moving back into the sonorous harmony, and the way that we move in and out as time unfolds. It all really resonates greatly with me as someone who, like I mentioned before, had an artistic practice and then went back to school as well. And the not knowing and the being with that discord, and in a way that it was an opening to a future. And even now, balancing the reality of, and I will probably enter discord again at some point, and just holding how to once again play with these melodies, or the in and out of harmony, and welcoming the discord. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to say one last thing before we move forward? Yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
I was also thinking about meaning and getting lost being partnered for you, and that there's such a societal discourse around certainty and knowing, and especially in the career of a therapist, and the knowing, and what a gift it'll be for those you're in conversation with, that for you meaning and fulfillment comes in uncertainty, comes in the messiness, comes in the let's get lost together and be in this story and adventure and the multidimensional nature of what it is to be a human in story, in life, in artistry, in conversation together. And yeah.
Last thing I'll say is it was such a joy to see your physical expression when you talked about the roller skating and the freedom of being lost in a process that can feel, maybe on the outside someone might view that as awkward, or oh boy, oh please wear a helmet, wear all of these things, but there's such joy and freedom in that fullness and that richness of expression, and I just that really touched me. Yeah.
Cool. Oh yeah, we can. Yeah, we can put it wherever. Yeah, it can go on the bound.
John, can I share a reflection?
Oh yeah. Whoa, it's Chris. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Stay out of this
please.
part, but
no, please, Chris.
I was
yeah.
inspired.
I'm so sorry.
No. Well, I'm at your back, but I too was really struck with this idea around making myself anew, and in my own work, I've been thinking a lot about liminal space, and that oftentimes as therapists, we are people who enter into and walk alongside folks that are entering liminal space. And I guess I was left with some questions about what does it take to make yourself anew again? What are the skills that are brought to bear in that effort? And how, I'd be really curious to draw on those, or to see what those might be, and to further advance this work of navigating liminal space. And also I was really struck with this idea of the path you saw of Jon's life. And I think in my own life, when I feel lost and I can't see what I can't see, I'm often drawn to people that are doing something. It kind of starts there, doing something that might be possible for me. And I was really struck by that. And maybe some questions around that I was left with were like, what did you see in that path? And watching Jon do Jon's life, what did you imagine might happen? And ultimately, sometimes I don't think we ask ourselves enough, what kind of path do we want to leave for others to follow? And so I was left with those questions. So thank you.
Nice, thank you. Cool. How are you doing?
Great.
You yeah. How are you? Are you on? If you were on roller skates right now, what type of movement would you be making?
I feel
you
like
think?
I'm like, okay, I think I'm kind of getting it.
Yeah,
And
you're
then I'm
kind
about
of
to
okay.
fall.
Oh, get the elbow pads out. Yeah, yeah. So, I'm wondering, out of, everything that was shared, and there was a lot shared, if anything stuck with you that felt like worth exploring more of, or felt like something that felt of interest to kind of continue our conversation on?
Yeah. One thing. Well, there are two things that at least I've held in my mind from what everyone said. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate. I don't know. I just appreciate that kind of thoughtfulness. It's very nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, one thing that I found really interesting is your use of both of you talking about like disconnection and as an opening. I thought was really powerful language, because I've been thinking a lot lately about how the word lost applies both to my my most difficult moments and the moments that save me. I find it very interesting that when I feel lost in my life, the only way out for me, or at least the reliable way out, is to get lost in music. That's always, for me, the solution. So I don't know. I found it. I really like that, the imagery of a fraying fabric opening as an opportunity. So I don't know. That just popped in my head. And then Lucy, the first thing you said, I was struck with, just because I wrote a song about this, and so much of what you were saying was like, there's one verse that is very much exactly what you were saying. I think the lyrics are like, the song is named after my hard drives where all my music is on. And the song is about like my decision to go back to school and the unknown of what my relationship with music will be. And I don't know if I can remember verbatim a song that no one's heard, so it doesn't really matter. But the lyrics are something like, last summer I shed my snake skin, my new skin rubbed raw and blue, a baby built like a river, in every rebirth you lose. So I was thinking very much about like that I was so within the experience of feeling like I was losing a very familiar relationship with music, but with the knowledge that there is something very unknown that I'm willingly heading towards that will be a very different relationship with music. So yeah, I don't know. That just felt very.
The image must have flown into.
Yeah. I know. So yeah, I don't know. Those are just a couple thoughts.
Yeah, and I think Lucy had used this word ectoplasm, which I really loved as well. I'm curious about, some of the things that were following and built off of that conversation were around using some of these abilities or these local knowledges that you've gathered through this experience in your current path in therapy work.
Yeah.
And I was kind of curious about that. Like, what, if anything, I mean, there were a few ideas that were tossed out, or what, if anything, feels important that you might want to borrow into this this new journey that you're on?
Yeah, I mean, all of it. I mean, part of my attraction to the therapy field is it feels in some ways exactly the same and in some ways very different. It was interesting, like, you know, I just had to take that class, clinical readiness, where like you have to like learn how to write your resume and all this stuff. And it was funny to be like writing a resume and being like, okay, like I haven't had like a traditional job in like 8 years. Yeah. Like, what does my resume look like? But also knowing that like that experience has filled me with so much that feels so relevant to play. And yeah, I don't know. I also feel like I know so little about what my therapy practice will look like because I haven't done it yet. I've only been in school. And part of me doesn't want to make decisions about what that's going to look like. I know that it'll just make sense when it's happening, and I'll figure it out, and I'll be clumsy and, you know, falling on the roller skates and all that. But yeah, it does. I feel like I'm in a weird middle ground where I know that all of these things are relevant, and I know that one day I'll understand how.
Yeah. And in the spirit of what you were saying, that, I mean, this idea of feeling lost, it's like I'm just struck by this play between lost and knowing, and how that again, I think it was something that Claire said, but this idea that we're supposed to know, or we're supposed to be certain about things. And it honestly, it feels like when we're talking about lost and knowing, that there's like this like binary thing going on that's like, here's lost and here's knowing, and like what it's like to hold the duality of those things. And I'm wondering if you have like any ideas about that for anyone who, I don't know, is listening to this conversation and might have, you know, be in a similar place. Like, how do you navigate that area of holding both of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always easier for me to like start with thinking about it within the music and then like grow it out to how it relates to basically everything.
Yeah.
That's just how my mind works. But
Yeah.
like I think of the knowing in relation to songwriting as like always making a boring song. Like, if you know exactly what you're gonna do, and you're like, I feel like the idea of the composer is like someone who's like, it's all in their head, and then they're just kind of like, yeah, I just gotta write it all down, and like, you know, it's like, but it's like so not what is important or interesting about music at all. It's like, I feel like so much of the process is like you start from that place of knowing and then finally get to the place of like, wait, where is this taking me? What's going on? And then you kind of like go through the whole experience, and then you end up at the place of knowing, which is like the record that you sell, which is boring. Mm-hmm. To you at that point. By the time the record's done, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, that like the value comes from the way that it reminds you of the journey of it, of the like experience of finding. That is where the value is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think of, I think a lot about movement happening, whether you're acknowledging it or not. That like there are always things kind of going on, and you can either be kind of like tapped in, looking up, looking away, like. So I don't know. I feel like I'm just saying things, but they all feel like splashes of something.
Hey, I
that
love it.
vaguely
I love
relates
it.
to
I love it. Well, it leads me maybe just to a couple final questions. That, I know you have an extensive catalog of music, a lot of music, and I'm wondering, what is it like at this point in time to look back on records that came out years and years ago, from this place of where you are now, in your life.
Yeah.
And what's it like to look back on some of those moments where, you know, you'd said earlier in the conversation that they're all kind of like pieces of this movement that's happened over time. So I'm curious what it's like to look back on those records for you as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I like to make a lot of music and then like finish it and put it out, because it's like, it's not about if it's good or bad. It's just like, this is this part of my life, boom, it's out there. This is this part of my life. But they all mean something different at different times that I'm
Yeah.
looking back on it. I think there are also certain records that like take me back really strongly, but because of where I am, they mean so much different things. Like my partner is over there. Don't look at her. She doesn't want you to look at her. But we've been together for 17 years, and like so much of like my music journey, like I see parts of our life. And there's this one record from 12 years ago when we like broke up after we'd been together for 5 years, and that record, looking back on that one in particular, it means so many different things at different times, because I see like the closer we were to it, it reminded me of pain. Then the further we were from it, it started to remind me of like this break where we had to understand ourselves in a way where we could come back and create like a very, very different, brand new kind of relationship. And then now we're like, you know, gonna have a kid, and at some point within several months, and like I just feel like there's like so much, there are so many different things. I mean, I also think of like I just think of like, oh, we met so young, like, you know, I used to look at that and be like, oh, well, yeah, that was when we like broke up and had to kind of explore a little bit. And then I then see, I don't know, I'm not articulating very well, but I see it very much as like different ways of making sense of that kind of long-term love and building that kind of life. So I look at my records, I don't know, I see very different things depending on where I am and how I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
But it's nice to be able to reflect on my life and see different things over and over again.
Yeah. It was so interesting when you just said, I look at my records. I'm so aware that we're having this conversation about music and everything, but for some reason when you just said records, I pictured actually records in a file cabinet, like looking at my records, like my records over time of like these time markers. Yeah. And it was like a flash, but then I was like, wait a second, no, we're talking about music right now. But it just, I think something I'm really valuing in this conversation is that I think you're speaking to is like the fluidity of meaning making.
Yeah.
And that experience of how meaning making changes moment to moment. You know, the way that I might be telling this story or the questions I might be asking in this moment would be very different than if we were doing this tomorrow. Or if, you know, and it's just that idea of the fluidity about it really is a value of my own that I really.
Yeah, I mean, it's so not a value of our culture. There's so much about like, you know, fixed identity and fixed ideas of who you are and fixed ideas of what you want in your world. I mean, it's like, you know, my idea of myself as a musician was very fixed until all of a sudden it wasn't. And I was like, oh, my life can have multiple meanings. I can have several practices that give my life meaning.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I was hoping maybe we could move into just a last segment here, which is kind of hearing from other witnesses who have been witnessing this conversation. There's actually a microphone right there. If anyone wants to just, you don't have to get up necessarily. You can just grab it and pass it around. But if there's anything that people are listening to this conversation and maybe feel like that is resonating for them, or any images that are coming up or any questions about the process or anything. Yeah.
This is more just something that, an image that came based on what you were talking about earlier about maybe needing to feel like a kid again or a child reborn, and the corpse and poking at it. And it was like, I had the vision of like a baby at a corpse kind of poking with hope that maybe it'll awaken or come back to life, and the baby not knowing, that it's a corpse and maybe it's dead, but that those are two versions of yourself, and that part of you maybe is over, but the baby kind of poking at it and getting sort of the indication that, oh, I have to journey on and figure stuff out. Just kind of those two versions of self, and how it's, just kind of the interesting part of the hope that's there and the not knowing, and then the other part that maybe doesn't have that is what it is. Just felt really interesting to then hear you talk about finding that baby and other things like roller skating, or going into therapy and learning this whole new thing. But yeah, just kind of is interesting. But thank you.
Thank you.
I was struck by so many things of this whole conversation. It's really been a pleasure to take it all in. And I found myself, just in the last part of this exchange, really moved by the idea knowing versus lost, that knowing is boring, right? Knowing is like the end of curiosity. It's the end of that being lost in a process, a creative process. And it made me think of how much I actually enjoy being lost in real life, like wandering around a city and getting lost, like on purpose. It's an adventure, that there's something about being lost that's an invitation to be, to have my eyes wider open, to be open to new things, to be curious. And that, what you were saying earlier, I really appreciated, right? That there's something about our culture that wants us to be certain, but it's so boring. It's so much more exciting and adventureful to be lost in a process. And that idea that I can, as you start working with clients, to invite the excitement around being lost in something and the opportunities that it offers to see what might be ahead if I'm curious, and I allow myself to follow that curiosity versus knowing, which is just like the end of questions. And I thought, as a piece of your therapeutic practice, I can see that convergence in an exciting way.
I love the word adventureful. Is that what you just said? Adventureful?
I did.
That's cool. That's a cool word. I wrote that down. I'm pocketing that. Adventureful, yeah. Does anyone else have anything? Yeah. Everyone? Yeah, you all can just kind of.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I was really struck by thinking about that sort of liminal space-time where you said you knew you wanted to go to school, you applied for the next year, but then there's that time where you weren't really ready to be in that space yet you knew that was the space you needed to be in. And it keeps making me think of the paradoxical theory of change, of in order to change, you need to be exactly who you are, is that idea. And just thinking about how you knew who you were and who you wanted to be, but yet you were meeting yourself where you were at, of not being ready to be there yet. And yeah, I've just been playing with that idea a lot with working with clients, or just in my own life, of sometimes your intuition is yeah, this isn't right and I need to change it up, but I don't know how to get there. I don't know what that looks like, and I'm not ready. So what is that in-between space of I'm shedding that old me, but I'm not ready to be who I'm becoming yet. And I feel like that's a really rich space that, as an artist, it sounds like you get a lot of inspiration from, and playfulness, being okay with being in the lost, but it's almost like where you're ending up still. So yeah, I don't know. There's a certain level of meeting yourself where you're at that I think was really cool to witness. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. I feel very moved by many things. I guess I want to reflect back an appreciation of the enjoyment of process over product, and I think that that's not something that's easy for many people to sit in. And I think that, again, that's such a gift that you will be able to give other people, of sort of celebrating that process when we are in a world that is so product driven. And so it's nice to hear and think about that. And I also, as everyone, was struck by the corpse. But I think I'm left with this kind of question or thought around the difference of being lost and losing something, and how, like, I wonder about, I guess, your grief of, like, the dead future, and what the relationship to that, to sort of sitting with this dead thing was, but also holding that there's, like, a new thing alive simultaneously, and maybe this relationship of remembering the feeling of being lost in moments of loss, I guess, if that makes sense, is sort of a helpful, I think, guide. So not a full thought, but sitting in that, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so much. This has been so interesting. And I am aware, as you were talking about places on your journey where you are right now, and how many of us here who can relate to different parts of your past and your future, I'm noticing we're all sort of predicting, like, well, where is this going to go? Who is this person going to become as a therapist? And I think I'm excited about that for you. But I'm also thinking, this becomes one of your records, right? Like, this is a point at which you're going to go back, and I'm so curious to know at different points in your life when you look back at this moment, what you realize has happened here. Because I'm like, something happened. We're talking about all these things that are on the horizon for you that all of us have different points of intersection for. So we don't have enough time for all of us probably to think about and share all the ways that what you said has impacted us. But I just wanted to say thank you for that, because so many things just have resonated for me that I'm sure that's happening for everybody here. So very, very cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Let's pass it back over to Chris over here. Yeah, Chris, do you have any thoughts or final?
Well, I guess it's time to close. But in closing, for those that are loyal listeners of the podcast, you know that I do like to ask one final question of everybody that comes on the podcast, and maybe if we could have each person go down the row and have each person pick one book, movie, film, whatever that's inspiring you or capturing your attention today.
Yeah, cool, awesome. Well, is it okay if I choose both a record and a restaurant?
Absolutely.
I seemingly cannot be on a podcast without plugging a restaurant these days.
Go for it.
I would love to bring attention to a new record that it just came out, and the artist did an album release show here the other night, and I really love this record a lot. It's called Eight Pointed Star by Marina Allen, and I'm really loving this record. And so I would say that's something I've listened to that's really moved me in the past week. And then I'd also really love to plug a restaurant in Temple City called Bistro Naz. It's fantastic, and I love going there. I went there the other night with Lucas and Grace, and I just can't get enough of this place. It's fantastic, tasty, and thank you.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, me and my partner are having a kid soon, so I've been reading a lot of books about that. But one book that has kind of like I've been really affected by is this book called Transformed by Birth. It's I think like I don't know. It's kind of rocking my world a little bit. Yeah.
Wonderful. Can you say your first name before you give it, so we know who everybody is?
Oh, yeah, that was Lucas.
Thank you, Lucas.
Hi, I'm Doug. I was thinking really hard about what I was going to say before the microphone got to me, and I think I've been listening to the new Charlie XCX record a lot, called Brat. I don't know why that feels relevant somehow to this conversation. I think just because sonically it feels like a record that's on the cusp of something that feels new and unknown to me.
Great.
Thanks, Doug.
Tanya. What's inspiring in me in this conversation is I've been having this image of the Wizard of Oz and the Yellow Brick Road. And what I'm yearning for is maybe a future writer who's written about what happens to the Yellow Brick Road after an apocalypse. And so maybe Mad Max meets the Yellow Brick Road, but through the idea of rewilding the Yellow Brick Road and having it reclaimed back into all that we can get lost in, and that we're maybe not looking for the road anymore, but like bricks and yellow bricks. But I think that's what I'm yearning for, is a future where that book exists.
Cool.
Of course, you could write it, but Lucy, I'm thinking about the conversation, and I'm inspired by the artwork of Andy Goldsworthy, and I've just recently been writing about process versus product in that work and how it relates to narrative therapy. And so when Lucas was sharing, it really made me think about how those words can sort of be corrupted in a good way, that the product can be the process, because Goldsworthy's work is working with the environment. So it's like a dialogue between an ongoing process that where the artist is releasing it into the larger world. And you sort of inspired me to remember how important that is to me.
Claire, I am thinking about a song called Unfolding by Luca Fogel. I'm so sorry, Luca, if you're a fan of the Radical Therapy podcast, and I just messed up the pronunciation of your name, my sincerest apologies. But the song's called Unfolding, and it's a similar idea around, or maybe my understanding of it, and I haven't had a conversation with him, but the process of unfolding, unfurling, becoming, homecoming, and not just the idea of this moment, but weaving the past, present, future, and not just becoming, but what it is to be, and yeah, being story. And I also just read Bittersweet by Susan Cain, which was really, there are some really interesting parts about Leonard Cohen and the melancholy nature of songwriting, and it's an interesting one.
This is Scott. I usually have an aversion to these questions, and I just want to say thank you, because this is the first time that I felt liberated by it, Lucas, because what is inspiring me right now actually is my wife of 18 years, her project that she's writing currently. She's in process with it, and watching her churn and be in it is what's actually deeply inspiring me. It's not the finished thing. It's watching the sparks, the black hole, which is the inversion of it. But witnessing that, I'm now having a whole new appreciation because of this conversation of the process, rather than this having to name this sort of final completion. So thank you for that, because I feel so much better now. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Any final thoughts, John, before we close?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having
Thank you
all
for
of
the
us on the
invitation.
podcast, and thank you everyone for listening and hanging out.
Yeah, thank you all for coming out and giving us an audience, and please share the podcast widely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.